I'm in debt, more specifically, art debt. The past few days, I've been sitting down every morning and sketching things from my imagination. Working intuitively allows me to see what I'm good at, and more importantly, what I am bad at. It's very embarrassing and vulnerable for me to admit, but I suck at drawing perspective. It's the number one thing that is holding me back. It makes my landscapes feel flat. It makes my sage-old crone feel whatever this is. And this is tough for me to admit because I consider myself pretty good at drawing. I can draw really solid figures and portraits, but I've always dreamed of making beautiful narrative work, like the paintings that inspired me to become an artist. And the difference between doing one portrait and 20 full figures interacting with each other in an environment, it's pretty big. I've accumulated the debt of putting these skills off for way too long, so today, I'm gonna start paying it off. I wanna see how much perspective someone can actually learn in a week. And more importantly, I wanna try and apply these ideas to actually make something. Now, I've been drawing for years. Obviously, I know some things about perspective. I know that there's a horizon line, which is generally at your eye level. And as things get further away, they get smaller, and they recede towards a single point. You can have 2 points, which things recede to, or 3, or even more. It just depends on the angle that you're looking at something from. But it's one thing to understand the theory of something, and another thing to be able to do it. So to practice my perspective skills, I was recommended that I take a reference photo and try to draw it from a different angle, rotating it from my imagination. Okay, simple. I grabbed this still frame from a movie, and I'm gonna try to draw it from behind the couch, looking at the other side of the room. But let me tell you, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And perspective punched me in the balls. Where do you place the horizon line, and how do you know how closely to place something to that line? How do you know how to place an object above or below the horizon line? I know the theory, right? If something is above your eye level, you're gonna see the bottom of it. And if something is below your eye level, you're gonna see the top of it. If it's at your eye level, then you'll just see a flat line. But this reminds me of learning how to draw a portrait for the first time. Are you supposed to just start with a box? Or do you do the Loomis method? Or do you do long flowing organic lines? Or maybe you dive right in and start with the features. It's so easy to get caught in the weeds of these fine details that you don't even know how to start. So I traced over the photo a little bit to learn about where converging lines connect together. That's called the vanishing point. And then I gave it my best shot. But from this first attempt, I knew I needed a process. I felt like I was just taking a stab in the dark. So I spent a lot of time that day watching videos on perspective basics. What I learned from David Finch was that even though he was a comicer with decades of experience drawing complex scenes, he said it was extremely difficult for him to draw anything without laying out a simple perspective grid first. And that makes sense to me. Just because I've drawn the portrait for years doesn't mean that I'm not gonna put down a center line. Of course, I could probably do without, but why would I make things harder on myself? Rotating photos just from my head felt a little bit too hard, so I went to this western town which seemed really simple, and I was gonna draw it using a grid. Everything felt really stiff and awkward working like this. It felt impossible to keep track of the scale and proportions while focusing on all of these perspective ideas at the same time. And the sizing of everything and how it related felt really arbitrary. Also, every single video I watched laid out ideas of 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, but they never show you any examples of how it's actually applied to the real world. Then you go look at the real world and you realize that it's not a simple diagram. Every single object has different vanishing points. They all are rotated differently to each other, so they go to different points. Some objects are in 1-point perspectives, others are in 2, and some in 3. A tutorial gives you theory in a vacuum, but then you go out and you try to use it and you realize you have no idea what you're doing. And even though I watched tons of videos on my first day, I didn't understand how it connected to actually drawing almost at all. I tried moving the camera to a few different areas of this reference and making sketches from my imagination, but I got pretty caught up in some challenges really quickly. The foreshortening on these bodies is actually really incredible when you take the time to look at them very closely. As they get closer to the horizon, they get smaller, which is what you would expect. But it's incredible to wrap your mind around the fact that this body in the background is a sliver. It's the size of this character's eyes. When you draw this, your brain is going to try really, really hard to force you to make it bigger because it knows humans are big. And that's really hard to overcome. And these problems of scale haunted me all day. If I have someone who is this tall here, then how tall are they when I bring them closer to the camera? Well, this is where I learned that I can draw a line from my new position through my old position into a point on the horizon line. Then I can take that very same point, bring it through the height of my old character, and when it hits this new front plane, that's the same size as the original character, just scaled forward. And this took me like an hour of crunching my brain as hard as I possibly could to figure out. A brief aside before day 2 to tell you guys where I go when I want to learn new things, because if you're relying on Reddit or YouTube comments to learn art, you're gonna have a hard time. And I don't often endorse educational platforms because I don't want to support anything that hasn't actually worked for me. But lately, I've been working my way through stylized environments in 2D in Blender by Ulysses Verisalt. He was a concept artist that worked on some of the maps in Valorant that you guys have probably played through many times. And in just a few lessons, I learned an incredible amount about designing and painting environments. And that's why I want to thank Underpaint Academy for sponsoring this video. Underpaint Academy hosts classes from the best artists in the industry for people of all skill levels. Whether you want to learn basic fundamentals, environment painting, character sketching, or composition, you want to learn it from the best. And I mean the best. Their upcoming term has fantasy worlds and characters with Evan A. Munson, innovative character viz dev with Jeff Simpson, anime and gacha illustration, and Victor Moray's iconic splash art. Victor's made many splash arts for League of Legends while working at Riot. Seats for these classes just opened up, so grab a critique seat and get one-to-one feedback from one of these incredible artists while you still can, or for a cheaper price, you can get access to the live classes and the recordings to keep forever. They have a huge library of recordings of all the previous classes for you to check out as well. I've been eyeing Dynamic Shapes and VizDev by Leah Pinto for a while now. Her paintings are just spectacular to me. And to be honest, it's a shame that I have to go back to my art after putting all of these incredible artists on the screen. But if you want to learn from the best, go check out Underpaint Academy. Now, I know some of you are rushing to your keyboards, but Jake, I read in a Reddit comment that you need to learn Scott Robertson how to draw. It's the best book to learn perspective. And I know. It's a good book. I own it. It's right here, see? Because I've read all the same Reddit threads that you guys have. I've watched every YouTube video that I could when I first started as well. But Scott Robertson is like an encyclopedia of perspective knowledge. And I'm asking the question, how do I write better short stories and poems? And maybe I'm identifying that some of my sentence structure isn't all that strong. Would you really rush to tell me that, Jake, you need to go buy the Merriam-Webster 2025 Thesaurus Dictionary? No, it's not the right thing for me at this exact moment. I need experience and practice. Not everything is about pure logic. You can read the dictionary all day long and you'll never learn how to write a poem. But if you write a poem and you find something that you don't have the words for, then you can go to the dictionary and find it, and it's way more effective. That's the philosophy I'm taking. So today I started out with some warm-ups, drawing boxes, which completely drastically changed everything I knew about perspective. And all of a sudden, I felt teeming with ideas for brilliant illustrations, brimming with life, and no. It's drawing boxes. It's really boring, and I didn't really feel like I was getting much out of it. I've done it a bunch in the past, but I've never really had the context to make any good use of it. So I decided I would do some sketches of things around me in real life. And drawing my studio felt like way better practice. I could actually take the time to see how lines move towards the vanishing point based on how I was looking at them. And this is definitely something that I felt like I should keep practicing. It's important I keep my goals in mind when I choose how I practice. The themes that I like sketching primarily revolve around some medieval fantasy. So I want to start familiarizing myself with those different objects in the world. I see cars every single day in my life, but if I stopped right now and tried to design an original car, it would come out horrible, no matter how good I was at drawing, because I've really never stopped and familiarized myself with different designs of cars and how they're constructed, and that goes for everything in the world. It was time to start building up my visual library. I started out with a sketch of a town that I used to call home, and to be honest, it sucked. The drawing is fine, I guess, but it really sucked doing it. Everything felt really stiff and awkward again, and I started to doubt at this point if I was even gonna make that much progress in a week. I know it seems silly to say that on day 2, but it's really hard to start doing something that you have zero confidence in. And if I make a mistake drawing a portrait, I'm confident that I can fix it. But when I make one here, I don't even notice. I feel like I'm treading water, and I'm not sure if I'm too lazy to start picking away at all the smaller architectural details. And I also don't know if I need to be more charismatic and take care of big top-down ideas. But I carried on, and I did some sketches of this abandoned house from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I was able to rotate this one pretty easily, which felt like actually my first win. And it was already way easier than rotating stuff from the day before, even though this is just a very simple box. I gotta take all the wins I can. Also, I did a new sketch from imagination. I started with a small piece of Ilya Repin's painting, Barge Haulers on the Volga, and I tried to imagine something new to fit into it. I am genuinely sorry to anyone who knows what boats look like, because I clearly don't, but I did use some boxes here to make things, and it felt pretty good. Day 3, I started out with some boxes and form drawing exercises, and this is when it finally started unlocking something, that next level of understanding in my brain, and it still is really boring, and I didn't feel like it was that useful, so I decided I would try and make it more useful. I made an illustration just from these basic forms. I drew a rotation of the shack that I drew yesterday, just from my head, and I paused to think about what type of story this shack would tell. Why was it abandoned? Did anyone care about it, or would it just degrade into the earth completely unnoticed? That's when I came up with the idea of maybe there is a knight returning home from a long campaign, or he returned back to the lands that he was torn away from due to war. I sketched out a box for the horse and the knight on top of it, and tried to push it further by sketching the details more specifically into those boxes. It had only been a few days since I started, but actually this really felt like huge progress for me. I was using boxes and perspective to make something cool. I really liked using this broken fence here too, to frame the composition and create a sense of foreground and background. Still, there were definitely a lot of problems. The main one is that this knight feels huge, and the horse is just way too small for him. I think a large part of this is because the vanishing points are very close. Where parallel lines converge are your vanishing points, and the closer they are together, the more distorted things get, like a fisheye lens. If you want to make something feel more natural, you need to put your vanishing points much further outside of the picture frame. I also had no idea what the shadows of a horse would look like in sunlight. Actually, I don't know what any shadows of anything look like without reference, and unfortunately, you know it. That's what perspective is for. So now I had a mission for the day. I needed to go learn a new skill, how to find the shadow of something from any light source. So I learned that I can find the location of a light source and then carry it down to a corner. And where that line meets the ground is where the shadow will cast. If you do this to all the points around the edge, well, that's the shadow shape. Even on these curved surfaces, which looked so strange to me that I had to go into Blender and build this object to see if I was doing it right. But when I compared them back and forth, I was actually amazed at how close they looked together. I even challenged myself with a really complex object, like this box with a hole in it. It completely broke my brain and took me forever, but I figured it out without needing any more outside research, and I was really proud of myself for that. I capped off this day of drawing by doing a sketch of a castle, and then I tried to imagine what it would look like from a worm's eye perspective down at the bottom of the gate. I still have no idea how you're supposed to get the scale of things intuitively when you're working from complex positions like this. And it's just a lot to learn. It's tough. It's really hard. I started out this morning doing some sketches around the house. And once again, I have to say, this is the best practice out of any. There's so much to learn from drawing things when they're actually 3D and not photos on a screen. There's truly nothing better than just taking the time to look at something and care enough to draw it, even if it's something really insignificant. I'm sure I would feel better if someone took the time to care about something that I thought no one would notice. So maybe the world feels better when I draw my messy apartment. Part of the reason why I started doing all this was largely because of a conversation I had with Devin Corwin. He's the owner of Underpaint Academy and a brilliant concept artist who's worked on projects like Destiny for Bungie. I asked him for some help learning perspective, and he told me something that out of all the videos I watched, I never even heard once. If perspective is how we get the size of things as they move around on a picture plane, then Devin told me I just need to train my intuition for the relative scale of different objects. And this wasn't just done by drawing a bunch of boxes or reference photos. He told me that I could train my brain anywhere I go, simply by looking around and asking myself what the height of different objects are. If I was drawing a scene with buildings and street lamps, then how tall are the street lamps supposed to be compared to a building? And how tall are they supposed to be compared to the person walking down the street next to them? I went for a walk that day and I started asking myself, how many people tall is that building in front of me? How many feet tall is the car down the road? And I realized something. I don't even know how big the average building story is, or even how tall the average door frame is. Just because I see these things every day doesn't mean I know anything about them. He also recommended me one more exercise, to try and make a scale model of my room in Blender without actually measuring anything. And this was genius. If I wanted to get better at a sport like baseball, obviously playing a lot of baseball or swinging the bat a bunch would help, but it's much harder to find the specific stretches and targeted workouts that professional baseball players do to keep their body in optimal shape. The dozens of perspective videos that I watched over the past few days feel like reading the rules of baseball. I mean, there's definitely some stuff in there I don't know, but I'm never going to become a good baseball player by knowing all of the nuanced rules. This was a targeted exercise to build out my brain's intuition in seeing and comparing sizes. And it's funny, now I realize I didn't know how big anything was or how it compared to anything else, and how did I ever plan on drawing any scene without knowing those basics? Day 5, more perspective exercises, and I swear I take like a 70% debuff in drawing ability going from traditional to a tablet. I think I can nail an ellipse on a pencil or even a pen, but on a drawing tablet, I feel like a toddler holding a crayon with my full fist. I'm not sure if this is ever going to improve. I think with time it should hopefully get better, but I usually get frustrated at digital and I quit before I ever get that far, but I'm done with that mindset. I'm untethered and I am unleashed. I need to make a lot of bad art. I can't just keep protecting myself forever. So I don't care. I don't care at all anymore. I'm gonna make a lot of bad art, and I'm not gonna listen to the voices in my head anymore telling me that I'm bad and that I'm regressing back 100 skill levels and that I'll never be good. I do not care. I'd much rather look like an idiot now doing this stuff than an idiot forever. Maybe that doesn't make me, a real teacher who gives impermeable advice from the position of a master, but I don't care. You don't have to listen to me. It's much easier to lock yourself in a box and do one thing that you're good at and look like a pro to everyone on the outside. I could keep copying these 19th century master portraits my whole life and tell everyone that I'm teaching the French academic painting methods, but I wouldn't be, because they also made a lot of large-scale original paintings, and they knew perspective and they drew from imagination all the time. And just about 95% of the academic art world nowadays doesn't really ever touch any of that. And if they do it in the most rigid, long-form, boring way possible. I mean, look at Bouguereau's sketchbook. How many of you have ever said that you want to paint like Bouguereau? Or maybe some of you have even made copies of his work. But how many of you keep a sketchbook that looks like this? If the answer is that you don't, well, do you want to be like him, or do you want to have the aesthetics of him? I think for a lot of you, it's the aesthetics. And I think for me, there's also a lot of the aesthetics too. It's just hidden under deeper levels of academic cope. And I don't want it to be like that forever. I want to be more. So I did those perspective exercises, and then I attempted to sketch out some more houses from Kingdom Come Deliverance. I really like the artists that worked on this game. At this point, I do feel a lot more confident in building out some of these basic forms really quickly. So I decided to draw a floor plan of this building. Then I closed the reference and tried to draw the building again. Then I designed my own, slightly different, but still very similar to the original floor plan, and I tried to sketch that one. Then I tried to rotate to the other side of the building. At this point, I was just trying so hard to understand the perspective of this that my brain felt like, you know that the sound that old hard drives make, like that was coming out of my head. It was really hard, and I was totally mentally fine. Okay, I was enjoying every second of this, and it was all wonderful, and just learning things is so much fun, and I love doing things I'm bad at. It's really fun. Now, for the final 2 days, I wanted to remember why I was doing all of this, to make better illustrations. So I'm going to dedicate them to executing one of my favorite sketches from this past week. This one. That's why I've been drawing these shacks for the past few days. I have a vast visual library filled to the brim with shelving, and each of those shelves are completely empty, and there's just like one postcard in this library with an image of the shack on it. I'm the shack guy now, okay? I know how to draw shacks. So I did my warm-up sketches, and then I started thumbnailing to come up with some ideas of this painting. I like the broken fence in this one, and I wanted to make sure that made a return. And in general, I like this composition a lot. I just needed to calm the perspective down a bit to make everything look more to scale. My only goal for this day was to decide on a composition and make a sketch to paint over for tomorrow. At this point, I felt really comfortable using the scale trick to determine the size of things too. From my practice modeling my room, I know that a door frame is about 6'7" now. And I learned that someone on a horse is about 9 feet tall. So this person needs to be 1.5 doors tall. I transferred that door height over to the foreground and then added a little bit on. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it just needs to be within the realm of possibility. It feels so good to have this trick up my sleeve now. I can really easily transfer the size of figures around the scene, and I'm not just guessing anymore. I used my shadow projection techniques this time to get a more accurate lay of all the shadows, and this was really cool because I can move the light source around however I want. And for super complex objects like the horse, I can take a few lines to get a rough idea, and then block in a good enough to be convincing shape for the shadow. This was the final day. All I had to do was the incredibly simple task of painting an illustration in a single day. And again, I am hit with the challenge of not having all the answers handed to me from a reference. Of course, I assembled some references together to help with the individual elements, but the overall lighting and color has to unify them together, and that's no easy task. Really, that's a task that's outside the scope of this video and outside the scope of my brain in general. For now, I'm gonna get there. At this point, around halfway through, I wanted to quit so bad. Everything was going so poorly. My figure was stiff as a board, my horse was wonky, and I rotated the pose of the horse from a completely different reference, so I had no idea what I was doing. The colors felt too bright and cheery for this narrative. The shapes of the trees in the background felt completely different now that I had color on them. Everything felt different now that I had a color and lighting. But I've been doing this for some time now, and I got some tricks up my sleeve. One of them being foliage brushes. Painting all this grass and leaves by hand would have been a nightmare. And normally that's the type of challenge that I take on because that's the type of academic mindset, just do everything the hard way. But when I'm balancing this many things at once, I can't do everything the hard way. No one can do everything the hard way. These brushes saved me. It added so much variety to the edges, to the depth of the scene. It gave so much context to what I was looking like on the ground. Oh, it completely saved the painting, and it saved my mood too. It made me feel so much better about this painting. And looking back on this, for only a week, I really got a lot done, and I learned a lot. I was hoping I'd become a master by the end of the week, but in art time, a week is basically nothing. It takes years to understand some basic concepts of art. But I'm really excited by the possibilities that this is unlocking. I feel like I can build up a basic visual library now by more methodically studying the form of things and rotating them for my imagination and drawing them for fun in different contexts. That way I actually get the experience to understand why things like boxes are important. And in the future, I'm definitely not going to be copying references one-to-one as much anymore. I mean, there's certainly a time and place for that, but I beat that horse until a train sailed home. As for this painting, it was a lot of work for a painting that turned out to be tragically mid, but I'm okay with that. I'm bad, and honestly, I don't really care as long as I'm learning. I can't even begin to imagine what my art would look like if I did this 50 more times this year. So I'm gonna keep being bad. And I hope that you guys give being bad a shot too. I'll see you on the next leg of my art journey.